Russian troops continue intense shelling attacks this weekend in Ukraine. Let's bring in South Carolina Congressman Ralph Norman for more on military operations and the humanitarian crisis there. He is on the House Homeland Security and Oversight Committees. Congressman, first of all, the continuing quandary of these Polish MiGs, Soviet-built fighters that now belong to Poland, that the United States first said, yeah, you can ship those into Ukraine, and then sort of backed away. Where does that stand, and what do you think about the stalemate that the United States has left Poland in here?
You know, John, it's unfortunate this president is continuing to not give the green light to give the Ukrainians what they need to fight. It's not like we're asking Americans, pilots to fight. It's giving the Ukrainian people the necessary protection from the MiGs, and why he's not letting the MiGs use our off-ramp to get on to fly in is beyond me. No one can understand why he's doing that.
Well, I want to play for you something that Democratic Senator Dick Durbin, the majority whip, had to say about all of this, and I'll get your thoughts afterwards. Listen.
We're asking for 1/3 of the Polish Air Force to be sent into Ukraine. The people of Poland, of course, want to make certain that they're safe. There are other ways for us to provide surface-to-air missiles and air defenses that will keep the Russians at bay in terms of their aerial attack. I think there are ways to do that are consistent with the NATO alliance and would not jeopardize expanding this into World War III or even worse.
Well, of course, the people of Poland want to know that they are safe, but the people of Poland are also covered under the NATO treaty. An attack on Poland would bring the fire of NATO down on the Russians or the Belarusians or anybody else who staged such an attack. So why not go ahead and send the MiGs over?
Well, this president's sending the message to the whole world that he's just inept. He's not going to do it, and time is running out. You look at what's happening to the cities all across the Ukraine now. 80% of the towns are torn up, apart. The time is running out. He's going to miss the opportunity if he doesn't give the green light to it. But I don't think he is, and he has given no indication that he's going to make that call, which he should make.
Yeah, the Russians have said Mariupol on the coast has something like 6 hours to surrender. I don't know what happens if they don't, and there's no indication from the Ukrainians that they're going to, but there's very little left of Mariupol already. Here's what Senator Barrasso of Wyoming had to say about the president's stature, which seems to be leading from behind. Listen.
The president has had to be pushed and pulled to where he is today. It was Congress that brought about sanctions, that brought about the ban on Russian oil, that brought about weapons, and all of this big aid package that I voted for a week or two ago, $13 billion. So far, the administration has only released $1 billion of that. And I think if they'd done more in sanctions, we might not have been in this situation if they had done punishing sanctions before the tanks began to roll.
Yeah, and President Biden said the sanctions were going to prevent all of this from happening in the first place. He was obviously wrong about that. Why not release more money? Why not get those anti-aircraft systems, for instance, into Ukraine?
John, he's known about this since April of last year. He's taken no action. He slow-walked even the sanctions, the cutting off the oil from Russia. Everything he's doing is as if he's wanting Ukraine to fall, and he's not helping himself with letting Russians negotiate the JCPOA with the Iranians. So the question is why? And, if this isn't a case for really taking seriously impeaching Biden, I don't know what is. We're seeing on the national, on the world stage, a humanitarian crisis like we've never seen before. We saw that when Zelensky spoke to Congress. He showed the film of the children getting blown up, the innocent civilians. So it's time for all of Congress to come forward and ask Biden to do the right thing and release the MiGs.
Congressman Ralph Norman, Republican from South Carolina. Congressman, thank you.
My pleasure.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.